The night in Oakwood Heights was calm, the kind of silence that wrapped around every house like a warm blanket. Streetlights glowed a faint orange, crickets chirped from the bushes, and all across the neighborhood families slept peacefully. But on this night, something unusual broke through that calm. 3 long black cars rolled quietly down the main street. Their engines hummed low, almost cautious, as if they didn't belong there. The cars stopped in front of a row of houses, their dark windows reflecting the glow of the lamps. The door of the first car opened, and a tall man stepped out. His hair was long, brushing across his shoulders, and in the dim light, his smile glimmered with golden teeth. Black sunglasses covered his eyes, though it was long past midnight. Behind him, 6 men got out of the cars. They moved with precision, dangerous in their silence. Thick arms, black jackets, and hard faces gave them the look of trained guards. They didn't laugh, didn't speak, just stood there, scanning the houses like hunters sizing up prey. The tall man with gold teeth raised his chin slowly, looking at the peaceful homes around him, as if imagining them already under his command. They stayed there only a few minutes, and then, as suddenly as they came, they got back into their cars and drove away, their taillights vanishing into the dark. Only one person saw them. 9-year-old Jacob, who couldn't sleep that night, had been peeking through his bedroom window. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat as he watched the strange men. When he ran to his father's room and whispered what he had seen, his father chuckled sleepily. "Guests, maybe. Don't fill your head with scary stories, Jacob. Go to sleep." By morning, Oakwood Heights was back to its usual self. The sun lit up the green lawns, sprinklers danced in arcs of water, and neighbors greeted each other with smiles and waves. The smell of fresh coffee and pancakes drifted out from kitchen windows. It was a neighborhood that seemed perfect. Wide streets lined with trees, a big community park with slides and swings for the children, basketball courts where teenagers gathered, and a well-kept community center where the HOA arranged events. Everyone knew each other, and everyone cared for each other. It wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a family spread across many houses. On Maple Street, laughter echoed as children gathered at the playground. Jacob, the same boy who had seen the cars, was now running with his friends, the memory of the night fading as his father's words echoed in his mind. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was just guests. Near the basketball court, Mr. Henry stood tall, whistling while mowing his lawn. He was in his early 40s, strong from years of hard work, with short brown hair and a steady smile. His wife Laura was sitting on the porch with a glass of iced tea, watching their 2 daughters chase each other across the yard. Henry was known for his sense of fairness. Whenever kids argued at the playground, he would step in, calm them down, and send them back laughing. People trusted him. He had become a natural leader in the community, someone people turned to when there was a problem. Across the street lived Mr. Davis, an elderly man with gray hair and a permanent twinkle in his eye. He lived with his son Michael, his daughter-in-law Sarah, and their teenage boy Kevin. Davis loved telling stories of the old days, and kids often gathered around him on summer evenings to listen. His voice was warm, his humor sharp, and his wisdom respected. Not far away lived the Thompson family. James, a tall, good-natured man in his mid-30s, his wife Emily, and their mischievous twin boys. The Thompsons were the life of every barbecue, always cracking jokes, always ready with food and drinks. They loved organizing community games, from tug-of-war in the park to pie-baking contests. The Martinez family lived 2 blocks down. Carlos Martinez, a school teacher, and his wife Maria were known for their generosity. Their 3 kids often filled the playground with laughter, and Maria made it a tradition to bake cookies for every new family that moved into Oakwood Heights. And then there was the Parker family. David Parker, his wife Rachel, and their young daughter Lily. David was quiet but kind. someone who preferred helping from the background rather than standing in the spotlight. Rachel was cheerful and loved gardening, and little Lily was the sunshine of the neighborhood. Together, these families and many others made Oakwood Heights more than just streets and houses. It was a community of shared lives, shared joys, and shared struggles. When one person celebrated, everyone celebrated. When one person fell into trouble, the whole neighborhood came together to help. It was Saturday morning now, and the playground was alive. Jacob ran with the Thompson twins, laughing as they tumbled into the grass. Emily Thompson called out, "Careful, boys," while James set up a grill for the weekend cookout. Maria Martinez walked over with a basket of cookies, and Laura Henry joined her, the two women chatting happily about the upcoming neighborhood fair. At the basketball court, teenagers dribbled and shouted, while Mr. Davis watched from a bench, clapping whenever someone scored. David was busy fixing a broken swing with his toolbox, sweat dripping from his brow, but his smile wide as Lily and the other kids cheered him on. Everything felt normal, perfect, safe. But Jacob couldn't shake what he had seen. Every time a car drove by, his eyes followed it. Every time a shadow stretched across the street, he felt a chill. He hadn't told his friends, not even the twins, but in his heart, he knew the men from that night were no ordinary guests. As the sun dipped lower that evening, families gathered for the community barbecue. The smell of grilled burgers filled the air, children ran with sparklers, and laughter echoed down the streets. It was the kind of scene people dreamed about when they thought of the perfect neighborhood. Henry raised his glass and called out, "To Oakwood Heights, our home, our family." The crowd cheered, glasses clinked, and the night came alive with music and joy. But at the far edge of the neighborhood, parked just beyond the trees, a pair of headlights glowed silently in the dark. A figure sat inside, watching, waiting. The night after the neighborhood barbecue, Oakwood Heights once again fell into quiet. Lights and windows flicked off one by one, leaving the streets empty, except for the steady hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a distant dog. The smell of grilled burgers still lingered faintly in the air, drifting across lawns and porches. Jacob lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His father's words, "just guests," echoed in his ears. But no matter how much he tried, he couldn't forget the way the men had stood silently by the cars. Something about the leader's slow smile, the gold teeth that caught the streetlight, made Jacob's stomach twist with unease. He rolled onto his side and pulled the blanket higher, telling himself over and over it was nothing. But outside, past the park and across the main road, a black SUV sat idle. Its headlights were off, but smoke from a cigarette glowed faintly in the driver's seat. The same man with gold teeth leaned back, tapping ash into the tray. His men sat quietly behind him, their broad shoulders filling the vehicle. The leader's sunglasses were off now, revealing sharp eyes that scanned the neighborhood with a calculating patience. "This place is soft," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "Clean lawns, smiling faces, easy to crack." The man in the passenger seat gave a grunt of agreement. "Looks quiet, too quiet, rich enough too." The leader smirked, his gold teeth flashing again. "Not rich, comfortable, that's better. They think they're safe. That's when people are easiest to control." The SUV engine started, and slowly the vehicle slipped back into the night, leaving behind nothing but silence. By morning, the shadow of their presence was once again invisible. Oakwood Heights awoke to another sunny day. The park filled with the usual laughter of children. Henry carried a bag of tools across the field to fix a broken bench near the basketball court,
while Laura trailed behind him with iced lemonade. Maria Martinez and Rachel Parker were walking together, pushing strollers with their youngest kids inside. James Thompson, ever the loud voice of the community, called out to his neighbors with cheerful jokes, drawing smiles from everyone. It was Sunday, which meant the HOA board was scheduled to meet in the community center that afternoon. The HOA, Homeowners Association, was the group that officially ran Oakwood Heights. Its meetings often turned into lively discussions, sometimes arguments, but in the end, everyone agreed it was better to handle problems together. The board had 5 members. Henry, respected for his fairness, often the voice of reason. Maria Martinez, known for her generosity, but sharp when rules weren't followed. James Thompson, the loudest, sometimes too quick to argue, but always passionate. David Parker, quiet and thoughtful, often keeping notes when others argued. Mr. Davis, though older, he was the most experienced, guiding the board with wisdom. That Sunday afternoon, neighbors filled the community center, chatting as they sat in folding chairs. Kids played tag outside while the adults settled in for the monthly meeting. "All right," Henry began, standing at the front. "Thank you all for coming. Today's agenda is short. We'll discuss next month's fair, playground repairs, and some complaints about late-night noise last week." "Noise?" James raised his eyebrows. "What noise? I didn't hear anything." A woman in the back spoke up. "It was near Oak Street. Car engines late at night, stopping and starting. Woke me up around midnight." Another man nodded. "Same here. Thought it was teenagers messing around, but it didn't sound like kids." Henry rubbed his chin. "That's odd. Anyone else hear it?" A few hands went up. Jacob tugged on his father's sleeve, whispering quickly, "That's what I told you. The cars, the men." His father frowned, giving him a look. "Not now, Jacob." Laura leaned forward. "Maybe we should check with security. Doesn't the HOA contract a patrol for weekends?" "Yes, but it's limited," David Parker said quietly, flipping through his notes. "Only 2 nights a week, not every night." "Maybe we should increase it," Maria suggested. "If there are strange cars roaming the streets at night, families need to feel safe." The room murmured in agreement. James laughed lightly, trying to break the tension. "Come on, folks. Probably just kids with loud mufflers. We don't need to overreact. Let's not waste the budget on ghost stories." Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. "Maybe, but let's not dismiss what people are saying either. If enough of us heard something, it's worth paying attention." The meeting moved on, but a subtle unease lingered in the air. That night, Oakwood Heights celebrated another small tradition: Sunday evening gatherings at the park. Families brought chairs and blankets, kids played tag under the fading sun, and the adults sat in circles, sipping drinks and sharing stories. Music drifted softly from a speaker, and the smell of Maria's homemade cookies once again filled the air. It should have been a perfect evening, but once again, Jacob found his eyes drawn to the road beyond the trees. Every time headlights appeared in the distance, his chest tightened. When the sun had finally dipped and the laughter began to quiet, Jacob noticed something. Just at the farthest edge of the park, near the shadow of the woods, stood a figure. He couldn't make out the face, only the dark outline of a man, tall, unmoving, watching. His heart raced. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again, the figure was gone. The next morning, the neighborhood awoke to something unusual. A letter tucked neatly into the mailbox of every home. Each envelope was plain white, no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with bold black letters: You live in Oakwood Heights, a nice place, a safe place. Keep it that way. Pay attention. More details soon. No one knew where the letters had come from. No one saw who had delivered them. At the community center, neighbors gathered in a rush of worried voices. "This is some kind of prank," James insisted loudly, waving the paper. "Some kid thinks they're funny." "This doesn't look like a prank," Maria argued. "Look at the wording. Whoever wrote this knows about us. They're warning us." Henry scanned his copy carefully, his jaw tightening. "Not a prank," he said finally. "This is deliberate." Mr. Davis, sitting quietly in his chair, spoke in his steady voice. "I've seen things like this before. Not here, but back when I was younger. Letters, warnings, people testing how a community reacts. The question is, are they bluffing or are they serious?" The room fell silent. Jacob, sitting on the floor by his father's chair, clutched his knees tightly. He wanted to shout, "It's them, the men, I saw them." But he stayed quiet, afraid no one would believe him. Henry finally stood. "Until we know more, we take precautions. Nobody should be walking alone at night. We keep an eye out, we report anything unusual, and we stick together. Oakwood Heights has always been strong because we look out for one another. That doesn't change now." The neighbors nodded, some with fear in their eyes, some with determination. The meeting ended, but the unease spread deeper. That night, another car parked at the edge of the neighborhood. Inside, the man with gold teeth lit another cigarette, his eyes glowing faintly in the ember. He smiled as he thought of the letters. "Now," he whispered, "let's see how much fear costs."
The letters had changed everything. What was once a peaceful, tight-knit neighborhood was now a community with suspicion tucked into every smile, fear behind every window. Oakwood Heights still looked the same from the outside. Neatly cut lawns, polished cars and driveways, bicycles leaned against fences. But something had shifted. Conversations at mailboxes ended more quickly. Eyes darted toward the corners of the street, and children were pulled inside earlier than usual. The HOA board called an emergency meeting only a week after the first letters appeared. It was unusual for them to gather so quickly. Normally, board business was slow and deliberate, but now urgency pressed down on everyone. The community center was full. Chairs scraped against the wooden floor as neighbors crowded in, murmuring about what the letters meant, who could have written them, and, most importantly, what should be done. Henry stood at the front again, hands gripping the podium. His face looked more tired than usual, and though his voice was steady, his eyes betrayed worry. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," he began. "We all know why we're here. Every house received the same message. Whoever sent it wanted us to know they're watching. This isn't a prank anymore. We need to treat it seriously." James leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Or maybe we're all just panicking over nothing. No threats, no demands, just words. People get scared too easily." Maria shot him a sharp look. "James, are you serious? First we hear strange cars at night, then we see strangers standing near the woods, and now letters show up in every single mailbox without anyone seeing who delivered them. That's not nothing." "That's right," David added quietly, flipping through the notes he had been keeping. "The wording matters. Keep it safe. Pay attention. That's a test. They're probing us. They want to see how we'll react." Mr. Davis, the eldest on the board, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. His voice carried weight. "In my years, I've seen intimidation before. This is the beginning of a pressure game.
They start small, they make you uneasy. Then, when you're unsettled enough, they step in with demands. The room buzzed with anxious whispers. "What kind of demands?" someone called from the back. "Money," Mr. Davis said flatly. "Always money. Safety has a price. That's what they'll tell us." The thought sent a shiver through the crowd. Henry raised his hand for silence, which is why we need to decide now how to handle this. We can go to the police, increase patrols, or take matters into our own hands. "Police won't help," one neighbor muttered. "They'll say it's just notes, nothing illegal yet." Another added, "And more patrols cost money. Our HOA budget is already stretched." James clapped his hands once, his voice loud. "Exactly. Let's not drain our funds chasing shadows. Until they do something real, we shouldn't throw resources away." But Maria's voice cut in, sharper this time. "And what if the next step isn't just letters? What if it's broken windows? Or worse, what if it's our kids?" The room fell silent again. Henry exhaled slowly. "We're split. Some of us want to wait. Others want action. We'll vote." But before the vote could happen, a hand shot up. It was Jacob's. His father tried to pull it down, embarrassed, but Jacob stood, his small voice, yet urgent. "I saw them," he blurted out. The room turned toward him, surprised. Jacob swallowed hard. "The night before the barbecue, a car stopped. 5 men got out. One of them had gold teeth. They looked at the houses, then they left. Nobody believed me, but it's true." Murmurs rippled across the crowd. Henry's eyes narrowed slightly. "Jacob, are you sure about this?" "Yes," Jacob said firmly, though his small hands shook. "I'm sure." For a moment, the adults exchanged uneasy glances. Some dismissed it as a child's imagination, but others looked deeply troubled. The description was too vivid, too specific to ignore. Mr. Davis spoke softly. "Gold teeth, that's a signature. Some men like to leave marks like that. He's not imagining this." The tension in the room tightened. Finally, Henry said, "Then we treat this as real. I'll contact the police tonight. Even if they say it's not enough, we'll make sure it's on record. Meanwhile, we'll schedule nightly watch groups, neighbors taking turns keeping an eye out. No one is alone in this." The vote passed. Even James, reluctantly, raised his hand when he realized he was the only one resisting. The next days were uneasy. Men took turns sitting in parked cars with flashlights, scanning the streets after dark. Mothers walked their children to school together, avoiding side streets. The HOA organized group texts to share updates instantly. But the unease grew when a second letter arrived. This one wasn't tucked neatly into mailboxes. Instead, it was nailed to the community center door. Bold black letters, larger this time. "You were warned. You ignored it. Now you pay. $50,000 in cash. 1 week, or Oakwood Heights won't be safe anymore." Gasps filled the neighborhood when it was discovered. The demand was clear now. The price of safety had been named. The board called another meeting that same evening. The atmosphere was heavier, darker. The friendly chatter that once marked these gatherings was gone. People entered in silence, clutching the threatening letter as if it were evidence in a trial. "This is extortion," Maria said immediately. "We cannot give in. If we pay once, it will never stop." "And if we don't pay?" someone shouted from the crowd. "What if they mean it?" James slammed his fist against the table. $50,000? Are they insane? Even if we wanted to, we couldn't raise that kind of money in a week. They're bluffing. Bluffing? Maria snapped. Would you bet your family's safety on that? Henry's voice cut through the shouting. Enough. This isn't just about money. This is about our community. We need a plan. We have two choices: fight back or comply. The debate raged for over an hour. Some argued they should secretly gather the money to avoid danger. Others insisted they stand strong, refuse to pay, and call in law enforcement. Mr. Davis listened silently, then finally spoke. His voice was calm but cold. I'll tell you what they're expecting. They want division. If we argue long enough, if we panic, they win. Whether we pay or refuse, our real strength is staying united. If we crack, they'll take everything. The room quieted, his words sinking deep. Still, no decision was reached. The board agreed to meet again in 3 days, right in the middle of the deadline. They hoped to have more information by then, maybe even help from the police. But that night, Oakwood Heights was tested again.
Oakwood Heights had changed. The quiet streets, once filled with laughter, now echoed with tension. Children played less freely, their games shorter, their voices quieter. Parents lingered nearby, eyes scanning every corner, ready to intervene. Even the familiar dogs barked more, as if sensing the unease. The HOA board met again at the community center. Chairs were arranged in tighter circles. Every decision now seemed heavier. The letters, the graffiti, and the broken windows had changed the tone of every discussion. Neighbors entered quietly, some whispering in groups, others sitting alone, frowning at the floor. Henry rose first. We have 3 nights left before the deadline in the letter. The board has to make a decision. We either organize security patrols for the entire neighborhood, call in private security, or find another plan. Maria's voice rang clear. We can't pay them. If we pay once, they'll come back for more. This isn't just a threat, it's a test of how far they can push us. James slammed his fist on the table. And what if we fight? What if they come back stronger? We're not trained for this. They are organized, armed. Half a dozen men can take over an entire street in minutes. David Parker spoke calmly, yet with a weight that drew attention. We need a plan that doesn't involve giving up or panicking. We have to record everything, coordinate with the authorities, and, most importantly, remain united. At that moment, the front door of the community center creaked. A messenger handed Henry an envelope. The room stiffened. Henry opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with handwriting large and messy. Don't waste time. Make your choice. We are watching. The tension thickened. The board realized these messages weren't random, they were strategic. That evening, Oakwood Heights experienced the first real confrontation. As a group of teens walked home from the park, a black SUV pulled up beside them. 5 men stepped out. One had the unmistakable gold teeth, the others with hard faces, pistols in holsters. They didn't speak at first. Their eyes scanned the teens with slow, deliberate menace. Take a walk down another street, one of the men said finally, voice low and harsh. The teens froze. One of them dropped his backpack. A girl whimpered, but the men didn't strike. They left as suddenly as they had arrived, stepping into their SUV and disappearing into the night. Word spread quickly. Families huddled inside their homes, and whispers of fear replaced the usual greetings. Oakwood Heights felt smaller, tighter. Every house, every street corner, every shadow seemed suspect. 3 days later, the HOA board reconvened. The debate was fierce.
Should they call in a private security firm, as some suggested, or continue documenting, hoping the police would intervene more forcefully? Every voice was louder than usual, but the fear beneath it all made everyone careful not to escalate the tension. Meanwhile, Jacob's unease grew. He had been awake most nights, watching for the men he had first seen months ago. His parents tried to comfort him, but he could no longer ignore the truth he sensed. The neighborhood was in danger. Henry finally spoke. "We need to prepare for the worst. Security cameras, patrol rotations, and strict curfews. Everyone participates, no exceptions." The plan was set, but no one could shake the feeling of being hunted. Then came the night of the first major attack. Oak Street was eerily silent. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness. The black SUV arrived with its gold-toothed leader and his men. They moved quickly, breaking windows, spray painting warnings on garage doors, and destroying a neighbor's small garden. The sound of shattering glass and alarms pierced the night. Families fled to their porches, shouting and calling police. But by the time authorities arrived, the men were gone. Only destruction remained. The next day, the community gathered to assess the damage. Shattered windows, spray-painted messages, broken fences. It was a nightmare. But even amid the chaos, Oakwood Heights showed resilience. Neighbors helped neighbors clean up, replacing broken windows, replanting gardens, and supporting one another. The HOA board decided it was time to escalate their defense. Private security was hired, cameras were installed, patrols doubled. But the gang's pressure did not stop. Letters continued to arrive, each more menacing than the last. Threats escalated, and small acts of sabotage appeared around the neighborhood. Cars vandalized, playground equipment tampered with, and minor fires set in trash cans. The tension reached the courts when a formal complaint was filed. The gang's influence began to reach the legal system. Using fake voters lists and bribes, they won a temporary HOA election, taking control of rules and regulations. Fines were imposed arbitrarily, new strike rules enforced, and 2 community members were targeted with false legal cases, including one of Oakwood Heights' bravest defenders. Jacob watched as his father and Henry argued, desperately trying to maintain order. He realized he needed to act, though he didn't yet know how. By the end of Part 4, Oakwood Heights was in a state of siege. The neighborhood's unity tested, fear everywhere, and the villain's power growing with each passing day.
The tension in Oakwood Heights had reached its breaking point. The black SUV with the gold-toothed leader and his men had become a nightly shadow over the neighborhood. Families barely slept, children stayed indoors, and even adults hesitated to go out after dark. Yet, amidst this fear, a quiet determination began to grow, led by Henry, David Parker, and a small group of neighbors unwilling to surrender. The HOA, now under the temporary control of the gang's influence, was a tool of intimidation. Fake election records gave the gang a false majority. New rules appeared overnight. Heavy fines were imposed on minor infractions, and 2 neighbors known for speaking against the gang were suddenly facing court cases. The community felt trapped, the law no longer a shield, but a weapon in the gang's hands. Jacob had been restless for months. His eyes had seen what others refused to notice. He remembered the gold teeth, the dangerous aura, the silent men lurking by the edges of Oakwood Heights. He knew the neighborhood needed a hero. That hero was about to emerge. David Parker, quiet and steady, had taken on the role without announcing it. He began gathering evidence discreetly, documenting the gang's movements and collecting records of falsified HOA votes. His plan was meticulous. He observed the guards' rotations, their patterns, their weaknesses, and he knew the vote box containing the original ballots was hidden in the mansion's leader, protected but not invisible. The first attempt to retrieve it ended in disaster. David approached the house under the cover of darkness, only to be spotted by the guards. He narrowly escaped, heart racing as their guns flashed in the night. The second attempt was more calculated. He observed from afar, mapping the guards' rotations and the mansion's entrances. Yet when he tried to sneak inside, a hidden alarm alerted the gang. He barely made it back, realizing the house was stronger than he had anticipated. Each failed attempt weighed heavily on him. The community felt despair. Families whispered in corners. Children drew sketches of the men they feared, and the gang gloated over their apparent invincibility. Meanwhile, court hearings dragged on. The gang's lawyer presented falsified voter records, claiming the HOA elections were legitimate. The judge, faced with conflicting evidence, postponed verdicts again and again. Each hearing ended with the gang celebrating their supposed victory, while the community sank further into worry. Jacob, though young, watched closely. He noticed small details: when a guard shifted position, when a car left the mansion late at night, when shadows moved differently under street lamps. He shared these observations with David, who incorporated them into his next plan. The final hearing approached. It was the climax of months of struggle. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Community members sat packed together, holding letters, photographs, and records of vandalism. The gang sat confidently, their gold-toothed leader flanked by guards smirking. David entered last. He carried with him the evidence he had painstakingly gathered: photographs of the guards' routines, documentation of the falsified votes, and most importantly, the recovered original vote box. Government officials and expert witnesses were present to authenticate the evidence.
The courtroom fell silent as the judge examined the documents. David, standing tall, explained each step of the investigation, how the ballots had been hidden, and how the falsified lists had been presented to the court. The gang's confidence wavered. The leader's smirk faded as the truth became undeniable. Their attempts to intimidate the community had been meticulously documented. The original votes, combined with expert reports and surveillance, proved the gang's control over the HOA was illegitimate. The judge's gavel struck. Based on the evidence presented, the election results are null and void. The defendant's control over the HOA is illegal, and charges of intimidation and extortion are upheld. The primary perpetrator and his guards are sentenced to 20 years in prison. A wave of relief swept through Oakwood Heights. Tears of joy and hugs filled the courtroom. Families who had feared for their safety celebrated the victory of truth and courage. Back in the neighborhood, life slowly returned to normal. Streets buzzed again with children's laughter, and community events resumed. Henry, David Parker, and other leaders worked to rebuild not only the physical damage, but also the trust and peace that had been shaken. The park, once a silent witness to fear, now hosted basketball games, picnics, and community gatherings. Gardens bloomed under the care of neighbors who had learned the true value of unity. Jacob sat on a bench watching his friends play. The memory of the gold-toothed leader and his men was still in his mind, but he understood something powerful now. Courage, careful planning, and unity could overcome even the darkest threats. The sun set over Oakwood Heights, painting the streets in golden light. Families walked together, neighbors greeted one another, and the air was filled with the familiar, comforting hum